drama in Russia, with the country confronting an armed uprising headed by the chief of a private militia, the Wagner Group, and the man at the center of it all, Yevgeny Prigozhin. President Vladimir Putin felt hemmed in as he was, but he pledged retribution against Wagner fighters who were heading towards Moscow and capturing several cities along the way. However, 36 hours later, a sudden agreement with Belarus swiftly diffused the crisis that emerged with remarkable speed. President of Belarus, Lukashenko, stepped in, and what followed thereafter was actually nothing short of a miracle. It was as if there was a sudden aberration and then peace, as in maybe temporary. Yevgeny Prigozhin agreed to end the standoff and also agreed to proceed to Belarus. However, despite the temporary resolution, uncertainties still linger, with experts cautioning that the rare insurrection is unlikely to dissipate so quickly or easily without future repercussions. There is a sense of a strange eeriness, and many are wondering if Putin shall let go of what drove a major chink in his armour. Is he waiting in the wings to strike when the time is right? Who knows? We shall discuss that. But first, let's listen into the latest reactions on the erstwhile Russian crisis.
你提到的这个瓦格纳集团的事件是俄罗斯的内政。作为友好邻邦和新时代全面战略协作伙伴，中方支持也相信俄罗斯能够维护国家稳定，实现发展繁荣。中俄各层级保持着密切良好的沟通。
We are monitoring the situation in Russia. The events over the weekend are an internal Russian matter, and yet another demonstration of the big strategic mistake that President Putin made with his legal annexation of Crimea and the war against Ukraine.
The world is divided on Vladimir Putin. Some say that he has emerged stronger, while some say, nope, it's kind of over. But the past of Vladimir Putin has been mired in controversy after controversy. Now, the question that we are asking is, will Putin seek revenge? When we say revenge, we necessarily do not mean a kind of a physical assault or a physical attack, but then revenge in his own fashion. On your screens right now, that's the question. Will Putin seek revenge? The guests today who are joining me, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, who's a former diplomat, Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, who's strategy and geopolitics expert, and Major General Ashwini Sivach, who's a defense expert. Gentlemen, very, very warm welcome to all of you. Ambassador Trigunayat, if I can start with you. You know, it's kind of juvenile to sit on past precedents, but do you think Putin, you know, who's known for not really taking things easy, do you think that he will seek revenge now when the time is right?
Well, I think one thing is sure as far as Putin is concerned, that he is unforgiving. There is no doubt about it if you see the past history and his own track record. At the same time, this man was his own man. He is not somebody who was out of his outer circle or somebody from outside. But he went rogue. He has been giving signals for that for quite some time now. There has been a direct problem between him and the army top brass, as well as the defense minister Shoigu. So he has been mentioning what is known to the world mostly, that there is a tremendous corruption, inefficiency, and they are trying to undermine him. The fact remains is that on the ground, he has shown success where none existed for the time being. I mean, whether it is Bakhmut, whether it was Crimea, or in different other parts of the world. So he thought that he has got the legitimacy, and he continued to have the trust. But if the reports are to be believed, and most of them have, of course, come from the Western media, that there has been, and if you subscribe to conspiracy theory, then perhaps he was fooled around by other oligarchs as well as some people in the Kremlin. So Putin at the moment has tried to just sideline him, put him into exile, but it has also given him a handle to basically tackle the other two guys, the General Gerasimov as well as Defense Minister Shoigu, with whose performance President Putin has not been very happy. So therefore, it is important to see that how it will go out. But if, in my view, the days of this Prigozhin are basically numbered.
All right, Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, strategy and geopolitics expert. General Chauhan, let me bring you in and ask you one question which has really been, kind of dominated the narrative, as it were, that did this mutiny, did it actually expose Russia's intel failure? I mean, what is it? Suddenly someone walks in. I mean, is it that easy for somebody to do this? I mean, there are two theories. Whenever there is a conspiracy, there are two theories always that, of course, people knew within, internally, those who are part of the Russian army, and some say nope. It was friends turned foe, and the way the chief of the Wagner militia kind of walked in, he just betrayed Putin and did it. But then the thing is, very, very important question is that was it an intel failure or not?
Good evening, Sudha. Thank you for calling me on the show. It's very strange. The number of narratives that have occurred from Prigozhin's mutiny is actually, there are three main narratives here. One is almost immediately, say about after 5 hours, the US government said in a press briefing or in an internal note that they had anticipated this and they had already talked and briefed President Biden about this likely mutiny, and that Prigozhin was talking of mutiny for a week, 10 days before this. That was the first narrative. So there was supposed to be mutiny. The second is, was this an elaborate charade by Prigozhin and Putin to, one, create a feint or create a problem within the Ukraine front, create some confusion within the NATO, or actually target Shoigu, the defense minister of Russia. Or third, he actually did what he did, and that he did it. But I can't imagine someone who's been a part of the system, someone who's been so close to Putin, to actually do what he did. And that's the issue. Because people like this who are close, and Prigozhin and President Putin have been very close. They come from St. Petersburg. They've been close as young men. And he actually owes his growth to President Putin. So this kind of narrative that can something like this happen, can somebody cross 300, 400 kilometers through the Russian territory and almost reach 200 kilometers short of Moscow without being stopped? I don't know. It doesn't stand to reason.
The mind boggles, one has been, the mind really boggles that how is this even possible,
Exactly. Where are the hinterland troops?
Yes,
why
absolutely.
wasn't he stopped? And even his taking over the Rostov-on-Don headquarters of the southern district, it doesn't make sense. He wasn't opposed at all. And the people on Rostov-on-Don, you see the photographs that come out or the videos that have come out, are not treating them like traitors or like people who creating a mutiny. It's like an elaborate drama.
And therefore, there is, General, there is another question, and I'll go to Major General Sivach here. Major General Sivach, I want to ask you that what does all this prove? Like what, we just heard the panelists saying, and what even I said, the mind boggles. Do you think it clearly, points towards terrible factionalism in Russian army? Because see, the other theory is, of course, there are conspiracy theories after theories, but the other one, which has a lot of credence, is that this oligarch, this head of the Wagner militia, wouldn't have been able to kind of go there with such brazenness unless there was somebody within who had said that we have a deal, and maybe he then retracted and said, listen, I'm getting cold feet. So I'm just asking you the larger question. Factionalism is something which is most plausible, as it were?
Absolutely correct. My point is that three narrative what General Chauhan has said, possibly these all three are running parallel. But if we take what question which you have asked, and I am very, very sure that all is not well as far as Russian army is concerned. Remember that when you are taking use of a private army, it means your own professional army is not worthy of fighting. Are we supposed to say that tomorrow when we have to fight against Chinese, we will take help of some private army? So private army is not bounded by any rules and regulations. They are not trained in army fashion. They are not under Geneva Convention. So they can behave in a very indifferent manner. So therefore, the way this private army has been now almost become a main part of Russian army, the Russian army is not done well in this war. They have not performed well. Their success is not to that extent worthy of their name, that they are second best military power in the world. And everyone thought that they will capture Ukraine in another 10 to 15 days. It did not happen. They did not get much success. If there are success, they have got it. It is Wagner Group, whether it is Soledar or Mariupol, or you can say Bakhmut. So therefore, the point is that Wagner Group and Prigozhin became larger than life. They became important people, and they have a backing of Russian army and also the people of Russia. The reason is very simple. In case we accept this theory that they did it themselves, but if they have done themselves, there are two things which stand out. It means that they are part of a Russian army which is with Prigozhin, because the way he took Rostov without even firing a bullet. It is a military headquarters. It is a district military headquarters in southern part, which is fighting a war against eastern part of Ukraine. Second thing is, without firing a bullet, then they moved from there to Moscow. They came almost about 200 kilometers.
Right.
A private army almost dictating terms to Russia.
So you're saying there is factionalism within the Russian army.
100%.
There is a chink. That's what you're saying. Let me just go to Lieutenant General Chauhan, then I'll come to the ambassador. You know, Lieutenant General Chauhan, you know, Putin is known for not so much as national security as regime security. I mean, that's one opinion. Now, look at the entire, I mean, this reads like a pulp novel. So, taking this into account, do you think that he's actually, what I was saying in my introduction, is that perhaps he's waiting in the wings when the time is right? He will seek revenge from somebody he hoisted, who was known as the chef, someone who sold hot dogs, someone who knew this man, the head of the Wagner militia. No one knew him. It was due to Putin. So do you think that there is going to be revenge, but jab waqt sahi hota?
So absolutely. If it is not a charade, then definitely there is an issue where Putin will get back. But the issue is, firstly, let's take the war front. Let's take the Ukraine front. Has it affected the Ukraine front? Did this movement of 25,000 Wagner Group soldiers affect the defensive lines? No. They are used as shock troops. They are used as offensive troops. And they helped in the taking over of Bakhmut, but they are not holding defenses. So that's the first issue, that his moving out did not affect the defensive positions of the Russian army at all. Secondly, can an army like the Russian army have factionalism? I, as the GOC 1 Corps, had a very large major exercise with the Russian army, with their division which had come over. And we spent almost 6 weeks together. I am absolutely convinced that they are extremely professional, and there is no question that there is this issue of factionalism. Professional armies don't have factionalism. They don't have these issues that the third world countries of like in Africa or some other places have. They don't have those issues. So I'm very convinced about that this could not have happened. And Wagner Group by nature, if you see their background, and I used to read about it quite often, is that their majority of their interests are actually Russian interests being forwarded in Africa. Prigozhin had made his billions in Africa. So it doesn't stand to reason, Sudha. It really doesn't.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Ambassador.
I personally feel
that
Prigozhin,
yes, sir.
that there's a Russian attempt to try and move Prigozhin's troops from Belarus.
All right. Ambassador, I want to come to you. You know, it is, we spoke about factionalism, we spoke about whether Putin is waiting in the wings to seek revenge. But, you know, this entire theater, I mean, the production, do you think that it exposes Kremlin's past struggle? You know, this is, we don't have to go into ancient history, but we see that there is a past struggle. I mean, like I said, and I'm going to use that again, the mind boggles that someone with a private militia walks in, holds the country to ransom, there is threat, there is blackmail, there is general chaos, there is talk about betrayal, then he goes back and he says, I don't want to spill blood.
Well, you know, that one thing you should remember about Russians, they like their heroes. And this guy has somehow had become a hero in different fronts. Whereas the army has openly not performed that greatly. I mean, one had seen it in the beginning, and when they had to recruit a lot of people in the army, there was a conscription going on and all. So, which is not a very popular move in Russia. So, therefore, a lot of heat was taken away by this man. At the same time, I mean, the power struggles are very common. You know, when you start having success, you start thinking that you are the most deciding factor. And that's when the doom comes, doomsday come for him. This is precisely what has happened, in my view, to Prigozhin. Because Prigozhin thought that the Putin will depend and support and him. But what has he done in the bargain is, if, as General Chauhan said, if it is not really some kind of a play-out theater, drama, or whatever it is, which looks very bit unlikely to me at the moment. But what I should say is that if that is not the case, then what he has done is, by taking this kind of a decision, marching on to Moscow, he has exposed Putin's vulnerabilities. And that is something, and publicly, in a way, brought him, you know, some kind of a disrepute in the public domain. That's why we are talking about it. And that Putin, in my view, and I have met him many times, I must say that he is perhaps the only person who strategically thinks, who knows, but his generals have failed him this time. So he knows what is there, how to take decisions, what do you do, but at the same time, he also, like any ruler with absolute power, gets obfuscated by the psychophancy around. I think that is what creates problem. Then, as you know, that Russia is also, like the United States has a deep state, Russia has something called Siloviki, which means all the security apparatus, which is what rules the country. And there are always people with greater ambitions in the country. And therefore, there is a competition for who next. Even Shoigu, who is said to be one of the successors in line for Putin. He is also a Putin's henchman. And as you know, the previous president, Medvedev, was Putin's chief of staff. So it is a circulation of his own personal elites within the power structure that Putin always moves around. So therefore, we have to see it in that light as well. I think that perhaps openly, whether it is due to an external support, the support from the West, or support from some other oligarchs, or from the Kremlin, Prigozhin probably overstepped his brief.
All right. Major General Ashwini Sivach, let me come to you. You know, by all this, what the ambassador just said, you know, the thing is, there seems to be a lack when it comes to Putin's popularity and public support. Like, you know, the ambassador said that the Russians seldom forget their heroes. Do you think in this entire game or drama or whatever anyone wants to call it, in this 36 hours of blackmail, holding a gun to their temple, you think that Putin's reputation has taken a further beating?
I suppose so. You see, what has happened in this drama, the fault line within Russia has been exposed. and there is no doubt about it. If this was brewing up, why any intelligence agency could not brief Putin? Why couldn't they get any sort of a warning that such a thing is likely to happen? And very rightly brought up, Prigozhin, whatever you may say, is also a national hero. He has a lot of following within Russian army. So the point today is, okay, he may have played also with some help of Western intelligence and also American intelligence. But then he has exposed the Russian agencies. He has exposed, for some time the Putin body language was very defensive, and he was a worried man until Lukashenko then strike a deal with Prigozhin. So now question is, of course, once he has gone to Belarus, I don't think he can be of much threat to Putin. And slowly and steadily, Putin can handle him. But he was a big threat when he was going toward Moscow with his troops. So the threat is gone, but what has been exposed is, it is the beginning of the end. And that is where it will hurt Putin. Because remember that today everyone thinks that Putin is still very strong person, that there is a lot of following of Putin in Russia. But I say it is happening because the war has not gone in Russia so far. The war is still in Ukraine. The moment the war will go to Crimea, the war will go to Crimea.
But
let me tell you one thing.
But
then
that's what
you will find.
Yeah, you've given me a very good point.
Then you will find things not going.
Lieutenant General Shaukin, you know what, just now we heard from, your colleague, Major General Ashwini Sivach. I want to ask you, there is another view, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate. They are saying Putin did a good job. He stood there. He took it on his chest. His popularity graph has actually gone up. I mean, where do you hear this? People are vulnerable. They are gullible. Do you think that also seems plausible? That kind of an argument that he is not actually weak, he is actually much stronger.
Sudha, I agree with you. Though I agree with General Ashwani too. But there are some points that are still a little hazy and maybe a little too early to talk about them. But let's just talk of two issues. Supposing it was a charade. Supposing Prigozhin and Putin decided that they would pull off the charade, what would be the reasons? The first reason would be the redeployment of the Wagner Group, okay, towards Belarus. Because why would the Belarus president speak to Prigozhin? I haven't really understood that. It doesn't make sense. The second thing is, in this charade, what did Putin want to do? Did he also look at creating something like this to see what was the reaction of the people within his inner circle? Did anyone from his inner circle support Prigozhin? Maybe Putin was aware that something like this was about to happen, and maybe he wanted to, catch people who might be supporting a mutiny in order to further their own gains. So, Sudha, it's not very clear, because while the ambassador spoke about factionalism, the ambassador spoke of systems like these, I am still very skeptical about any kind of reasons why Prigozhin would do this, because he has everything to gain with retaining his relationship with Putin. But as the ambassador said, that within the elite of Russia, there are power struggles, and maybe he did this to expose the power struggles. Supposing within the inner circle of Putin, somebody had supported the Prigozhin mutiny, then he would have for certain known that this is the man I can't trust.
Right.
So these are issues that we need to look at, Sudha. It's too early. There are reactions from the US, there are reactions from Ukraine, there are reactions from the Western media, and that's the reaction we all are reading.
Yeah, you spoke about Ukraine, and that's a very important question. Ambassador Trignath, what does this mean for the Ukrainian war theatre? I mean, what does it really mean? As in, what forward movement, as it were? I'm not talking about whether the war will end or anything. I don't want to make such predictions. But considering that you are the experienced one here, of course, the other two gentlemen as well, how do you look at the Ukrainian theatre of war?
Well, I think the Ukrainian theatre of war is going to be still a prolonged exercise. And I mean, I don't really know what kind of a war it is, frankly. 10, 20 missiles a day, 2 people being killed, and a lot of noise being made across the world. I mean, generals know better what the war is. But at the same time, I think that Putin is definitely has been looking for some way out. And that way out, it's not being provided to him by the West. That's simple. I always maintain that if you want to, this war is to end, tomorrow if the Americans agree to allow that, it'll happen tomorrow. But this is not going to happen. So Putin is continuing that. Now this Wagner group moving out and all that, that may have some strategic implications because see that they were the ones from the front, they were going everywhere. The basic job of these kind of groups is to work in a stealth manner and try to, create. I mean, I read somewhere that the British intelligence apparently said that there are these 400 of Wagner men were looking for Zelensky and wanting to kill him. I mean, if that has been their objective, then going across to the forefront, they have shown what they could do, what the regular army could not achieve. It is not to say that this has the Russian army, as General Sivach also said, has not acquitted itself creditably in this war, and they have lost of prestige. And this has been a very good army historically. One has seen that. So I don't know. I mean, I don't see that there is going to be a great let-up. As such, Ukraine is quite a devastated country, frankly.
Yes.
I mean, it is. So as long as we continue to hear the things that we will fight Russia to the last Ukrainians, I think there is no redemption.
General Sivach, I want to come to you. After all, this militia was also in Ukraine. But then what are 25,000 soldiers, in the entire game plan, as it were? Those numbers do not matter to Russia. So, in a way, you can say the war will go on as it was, because if the war stops, then that is also Putin takes a beating.
Yeah, no doubt. The war will continue. There is no doubt. But remember that these 25,000 people were the one which meant a lot of action in Russia, because wherever the victory has been achieved, it is only this Wagner group which has achieved the victory, which was not possible by the Russian troops, especially Mariupol, Soledar and Bakhmut. For almost 1 year, they fought there. So therefore, the point what is there is the Wagner group, private army, was used by them as an offensive instrument, like a special forces, and they proved well to them. And that is what happened. It has also exposed Russia, that Russia, what everyone thought that are going to win this war in another month or so, have not able to do well, and now the war is going toward a stalemate. And no, my point, Sudha, just 2 things. My point is today, the complete military pundits of the world are surprised. Everyone thought, especially considering like India, that it is going to be short and swift war. But this war has proved no, the war can be long, and we are now worried. We have to also understand that we have an enemy in our northern border, which is China, which is preparing itself. Therefore, the war can take a longer, duration. So you have to be mentally prepared for such war. And the second thing is, there is no clear-cut victory in this war, and the war is not over. And whether this war will go toward Third World War or nuclear war, no one can say. All predictions done by all military pundits have been proved wrong in this war. And therefore, this is uncertainty of this war is also something to ponder about. Now, as the war is going on, there is a counter-offensive by the Ukraine forces. The progress is slow because any offense is slow. And the defenses which are taken by Russians are impregnable. There is no doubt they have taken. But what will happen next, God knows. Whether we will go toward Crimea or not, that is the thing.
All right, General Saab. General Chauhan, I want to come and I'm going to ask the same question of you, that, maybe the intensity of the war there will be a change in the intensity of war in Ukraine, because these were die-hard mercenaries and, they were supposed to be daredevil. Some say they were ruthless. So you think the intensity of war may undergo a change in Ukraine? The war will continue, of course, as both the gentlemen had said. What's your prediction? What are you saying?
So wars are not fought through the basis of violence or attrition. To understand the concept of war, you have to understand which front and what Putin really wanted to do. When he started decided to prosecute this war, what was his aim? About 10 months back, he spoke about his aim being to capture the Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine, which is roughly east of the Dnieper River, and the Russian-speaking areas are roughly about one-third of Ukraine. That he's done so quite easily. What the ambassador said and what General Sivach also said is that did he want to, after capturing this area, want a peace treaty or did he want a ceasefire? So maybe in his mind, when he decided to prosecute this war, he decided that he would capture this part, then seek a ceasefire, which would be given to him because he's got it in earlier campaigns in Crimea, and then from there on, continue to hold the Russian-speaking areas. Maybe that was his aim. So when
Right.
we talk about, when we talk about armies and when we talk about how they decide to prosecute a war or what were their decisions, we are not privy to their inner plans.
Right. Okay.
So this is one thing that I'd like you to, consider before we write off an army like the Russian army. If you remember that they did not put in the beginning stages a large number of troops. There has never been a large aerial bombardment. They have
Right.
controlled the skies from the beginning, but they have done nothing about it.
Right.
So these are issues that we must keep in mind.
Right. So
Thank
when
you.
we are talking about the entire vulnerability or the underbelly, Ambassador Trignia, this question comes to you that, it seems like South Russia is now, manifesting itself as the soft underbelly. I mean, a lot of discussion about Bakhmut, but then what about Belgorod, bridges? Experts have been writing that this is the vulnerable area, as it were. Would you agree? I mean, whether you see it in the background of the Ukrainian war, bridges were, damaged, there were lots of devastation around it. So do you think that that is also one of the chinks, as it were, because we are looking at, who actually entered this?
Well, you're right. I mean, that is definitely, we have seen many incidents in that place because it's in the firing range. And it is possible to breach the defenses, and the Ukrainians have been successful in certain incidents. But one more point I wanted to just raise, and I think my understanding is that the Putin, why he has not fully focused on Ukraine, is that now after initial, as General Chauhan, is cashed out, his aims and objectives were not met because he did not probably expect the Europeans and the Americans to go this far. There was a deal that has come out now in the open in April last year when Zelensky had agreed for the ceasefire and that they could go back. But when he went back and spoke to Boris Johnson and the Americans, then they said, no, we are going to defeat Russia. Although that's when the whole thing changed completely. And he's mired into this war. But I think that what the Russian strategy at the moment is that they are also expecting the escalation eventually with the NATO countries in the Europe. And that's where he has to keep his autonomous weapons, his maximum strength in order to counter that war. Because that is the real war that is going to be a decisive phase for him in case it comes to that. So I think that this is his game plan. And that's why the newly recruits and all that are being sent to the Ukrainian force. He's using Kadyrov from Chechen army, and he's using the others like Prigozhin. So that is probably a strategy because they cannot just consume the best into this kind of infructuous war. So he knows that if that happens, that probably that is my understanding of this.
All right. General Chauhan, I want to ask you that, all said and done, I think more than Ukraine, what really took a beating so far as Putin's image is concerned, his entire standing in world politics in Russia, at home and outside, within and without, is concerned is that this Wagner, emergency, I think, caused him more damage than Ukraine did. Would you agree? Can we just brush it under the carpet?
No, in a way, yes, because, how could 25,000 people drive along the highway to Moscow? Where are the interior troops? If you have studied the Russian army, as I have, they have a very strong interior army. And those armies are not on the border. No matter what anyone says, 92% of the Russian army is not on the border. There's no question. So there is a sizable vulnerability in a particular place from where, if true, Prigozhin moved, and Prigozhin was aware of it. But yes, it has shown chinks in the Russian armor. Yes, it has shown Putin to be slightly weak in a nation that weakness is taken as an absolute no-no. You have to be strong because that's what the country expects from you, and that's how Russia has always been governed, through strength. So any sign of weakness will create a chink and will allow Putin's enemies, and I'm certain there'll be lots, to take control or to use that as a weapon to finally depose him. So I'm not really aware, so that it's really too close to the point of the incident to try and give you an elaborate strategic reason. But wars are fought through stealth, wars are fought through charades, wars are fought through disinformation, and maybe Russia was trying one like this. I still feel, and this is my personal opinion, that, because I studied how the Wagner group was used on the Ukrainian, they were used as an offensive weapon to take Bakhmut. That was and they did so at a great loss to themselves. Almost supposed that they're supposed to have lost between 5,000 to 10,000. Now they may be, and they were not holding the front lines. They are not troops that were holding a defensive position. So there is no question of Ukrainian army taking advantage of that.
Right.
When an army moves and redeploys, and why Belarus? Because Belarus provides the eastern option to enter Kiev. And to enter from a different direction, which from where the Ukrainian army actually is quite soft, because they've moved all the troops for this counter-offensive. So just think about it. They moved all their troops for the counter-offensive in the southern part of Ukraine.
Right.
Suddenly you move the troops to the eastern part. Now, won't Ukraine be forced to remove a part of the counter-offensive troops to the east? And then what will happen to the
questions like these, it's very interesting, because I'm going to now, it's really very
I'm being the devil's advocate.
Yeah, that's how, General Saab, that's what this whole thing is all about. General Sivach, the thing is that there is so much mystery, there is subterfuge, there are smoke screens, which General Chauhan also spoke about. I want you to, there is this shadowy figure, not so much shadowy anymore, Lukashenko. What did he do? We know that he made a couple of phone calls, there were backroom parleys, but what exactly did he do that suddenly we saw that this character that, President is suddenly saying that, okay, I will move to Belarus and I will, sign on the dotted line, as in, I'm exaggerating, but I will agree to all your terms and conditions. What is this mystery? What must have happened? General Sivach.
Absolutely. See, I agree. This surprised every one of us that he was going toward Moscow, which I thought was not a correct action by him, because had he stayed in Rostova, it was very difficult to dislodge him. But nonetheless, he exposed a Russian defensive system, and he was marching toward Moscow. And then Lukashenko spoke to him, and then everything changed. And what did he speak? Why did he agree? This is something mysterious. One can't say anything. And was any Western intelligence involved in whatever has happened? Why did the Russian never came through? Why their intelligence agency failed? So these are all questions. Their answer will come slightly later. But one point which I want to convince you is that what will be the future of this war now? Now the war is because the counter-offensive where Ukraine is already started. Though the progress is slow, but yet there is a progress, because in offensive, the progress is always very slow. But what I feel is that Russia wanted that this buffer zone, this Russian-speaking area, should be now given to them, and the war can end on this term. But who is not prepared? It is not the Western countries are not prepared now, because they have already tested a success. They know what is the chink in the armor. They will hit Crimea. Take it from me. the war will go to Crimea, because now the question is coming is Crimea is a part of Ukraine which is illegally occupied by them in 2014, and thinking that the Ukrainians may go toward Crimea, they have destroyed Kharkova bridge. The Kharkova dam on Dnieper has been destroyed by the Russians. The Russians have destroyed so that the water flows into the field and the armour cannot move toward Crimea. So this has been deliberately done. As on today, Russians also know that this war will not end soon, and very rightly brought out by my co-panelists. So Russia, knowing that this war may go on, NATO is helping Ukraine, so he should be prepared for a long haul, and therefore he is not putting his everything in this war in the beginning, and he is thinking he may have to fight for another 6 months or 1 year. So considering this, the whole case is such a, you can say that you have to learn so many lessons from this war, and it will be very, very useful for all the historians. But to me, it looks like that this is the beginning of an end as far as Putin is concerned. Things are not very good for it. And as far as NATO is concerned, if someone say, will NATO be prepared to accept what it is? If that is the case, then why did they start the war? The point today is they know that today Russia is economically weak and it is becoming weaker day by day. After all, it is fighting a war by itself more than about 16 months. And even Chinese have not helped them, because China is a very smart country. They know if they give the weapon to Russia, there will be economic sanctions which will be put by America. So I can only say that this war is now reached to a place that though it looks like to be stalemate, but the war is not over. Every actor and character is playing. What will be the progressive role in future? God knows. Whether he remains in Belarus, what will be the role of Wagner army, whether there will be a change of leadership or whether they switch over to other place, that also known. But I agree on one issue, that till the Kiev does not fall as far as Ukraine is concerned, the Ukraine will keep on fighting. And now to get the Kiev, the best approach is the northern approach from Belarus.
Right.
But this
Ambassador
is very well known.
I'm sorry, General Saab, I had to interject because I'm running out of time. My last question goes to the Ambassador. Ambassador, in case, if you think Putin, I mean, this is not a question that the world is not thinking about. It's not something that we've come up with, which is so unusual. Is Putin seeking revenge? That's the question we are asking today. Do you think that the world at large, particularly, for lack of any other word, the Western world, is ready to counter any such move by Vladimir Putin?
Any such move against whom?
I mean, seeking revenge. I mean, if this becomes bigger, because there are stakes involved, across, but then the world is watching. Do you think that they are ready to kind of counter this in case this happens, unfolds, if they have a doubt about it, although it could happen much like what happened last weekend? No one knew, and, it all started.
Well, I mean, as far as Prigozhin is concerned, anything can happen. We don't know. But one thing that General Chauhan said really it can be a possibility, because getting this Wagner army into Belarus, which is actually a very strategic move by Putin in any case, because Lukashenko is also his handyman. And he uses him often for these things. They are parking their nuclear strategic weapons and all that in that place. And the country is virtually, they have mutual security, and he's surviving because of Putin's support. So if that is via Kiev, they are trying to pressure the Ukrainians through invasion of Kiev from the other side, and that will be another dimension to the war. As far as Putin is concerned, I think that he is prepared for the worst. He would like the war to end, in my view. But he has no face saving at the moment. Until and unless he gets some kind of a face saving, the war will continue, and it may become worsen even. And if he is pushed to the corner, then all bets are on.
Absolutely. And let's wait and watch how this situation actually unfolds. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Ambassador Trignia, thank you very much. General Chauhan, it was a pleasure. General Sivach, absolutely riveting conversation. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this conversation. And for all the news and analysis, this is your destination. Keep watching News9 Live.
इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे हैं, जो कि सभी लोग कर रहे हैं।
Coaching is now starting from grade 3, 4, 5, 6.
कोटा जाने वाली बीच राह में, आधे टेस्ट देके हैं सिलेक्शन की चाह में।
ऑल इंडिया का बच्चा कोटा जाता है।
This rat race is for rats, not for humans. So why should we even be a part of it?
The Rat Race. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
आज भ्रष्टाचार में लिप्त जितने भी चेहरे हैं वो सब एक साथ एक मंच पर आ रहे हैं।
इस वक्त की ये सबसे बड़ी खबर आई है जहां लोकसभा की सदस्यता राहुल गांधी की मानहानि के केस में सजा के बाद लोकसभा की सदस्यता खत्म हो गई है।
I am not scared of these threats, of these disqualifications, of these allegations, of these prison sentences. I don't care. I'm not scared of them.
I would say Mr. Rahul Gandhi is definitely not the leader that the fulcrum would accept.
It entirely depends on Rahul Gandhi whether he wants to be a political martyr or not.
चाहे मुझे सदस्यता मिले ना मिले, मैं अपना काम करूंगा। अगर मुझे रीइंस्टेट कर दें तो भी मैं अपना काम करूंगा। मुझे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता मैं पार्लियामेंट के अंदर हूं या बाहर हूं, कहां हूं।
India goes into general elections in 2024 and what you saw was a parliament that was very emotional and very angry and very upset about some recent utterances of Mr. Rahul Gandhi, and lo and behold a court in Surat catches the same theme as the parliament is talking about, and